First tonight, 5 hours of talks in Moscow between President Putin and the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff about a peace plan for Ukraine have ended without a breakthrough. According to the Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov, the discussions were very useful, productive and detailed, but he said no compromise had been reached with regard to Ukrainian territory and there was still much work to do. And President Putin did not agree to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Referring to the U.S. draft peace plan, Mr. Ushakov said Russia agreed with some points but criticized others, and they were not close to coming up with a compromise version yet.
They are on the side of the war. Even when they try to supposedly introduce some changes to Trump's proposal, we see clearly what they are doing. All these changes are aimed at only one thing: to completely block the entire peace process by putting forward demands that are absolutely unacceptable for Russia. They understand this. By doing so, they intend to blame Russia for the collapse of this peace process that is their goal. We see this clearly. We're not going to have a war with Europe, I've already said, but if Europe suddenly wants to wage a war with us and it starts it, we are ready right away. There can be no doubt about that. With Ukraine, we are acting in a surgical, very precise manner. This is not a war in the direct, modern sense of the word. If Europe suddenly decides to wage a war with us and starts it, a situation may quickly arise in which there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
Только что закончилась беседа нашего президента, который принял двух.
Our President, Vladimir Putin, just finished talks with two representatives of the U.S. President Donald Trump, U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and businessman Jared Kushner. The conversation was useful, constructive, and very substantive, and did not last for 5 minutes, but rather 5 hours. There was a chance to discuss the prospects for further joint efforts to achieve the long-term peace settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. Naturally, we and our American colleagues discussed the content of those projects, those documents that the Americans had sent to Moscow some time ago. We of course went through these documents. We did not discuss the specific points, the specific American proposals, but we discussed the essence of what was included in these American documents. We were able to agree with something and the President confirmed it with his interlocutors. Some other points drew criticism from us, and the President did not hide our critical and even negative attitude towards several proposals. The main thing is that a very useful discussion was held, and I will once again emphasize that the parties said that they were ready to continue joint work in order for the long-term peaceful regulation in Ukraine. We discussed specific territorial problems without which we do not see the resolution to the crisis. Of course, huge prospects for the future of the economic activity of the two countries were discussed. A lot has been said about it so far, including on previous meetings, but we noted that if Moscow and Washington want to cooperate, both sides have to show real commitment to it. In general, it was a very useful, good conversation. It began with the fact that Trump representatives handed over greetings and the best wishes from their president to Vladimir Putin. And our President Putin, in turn, asked his partners to send friendly greeting to Trump. Moreover, he not only conveyed friendly greetings, but also asked to pass on a number of important political signals, which his interlocutors recorded and will report on in Washington.
Сигналов, которые его собеседники зафиксировали, и, естественно, доложат об этом в Вашингтоне.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Dr. Laskiewicz, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner at the Kremlin for 5 hours on Tuesday for much anticipated talks with President Putin on President Trump's plan for peace in Ukraine. We heard the Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov saying the substance of the discussions will remain confidential, but that they were positive. What's your reading of that?
I think it's important to point out strictly speaking, there was a Putin-Trump plan which went to President Zelensky, who amended with Trump many of the points. So what has been sent back now in Moscow is being discussed is actually a Zelensky-Trump version of the original Putin plan, and it's the changes that Zelensky put into it that is in fact the sticking point. And the talks which are of substance, as far as I can tell, would be quite simple. That although some of the points are in agreement and can be accepted, the fundamental sticking points about territory remain. There is a complete divergence of views there. And of course, whether Ukraine can become a member of NATO or not, and the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, all this still remains. And therefore, as a result, we are actually not much further forward, although, please note, the pleasantries between President Donald Trump and President Putin are an indication that talks will continue for the time being. Although that changes nothing on the ground, Russia is still advancing.
So clearly, I mean, as you correctly pointed out, there's no breakthrough, even if the Kremlin said the door to a solution remained open. And the big issue, as you pointed out, the crucial sticking point is in all this appears to be Ukrainian territory. And Mr. Ushikov also mentioned that Vladimir Putin commented on what he called the destructive actions of European countries over the Ukraine peace process. Mr. Putin's been quite indignantly criticizing the Europeans, hasn't he, saying they are sabotaging peace. So quite a bit of saber rattling towards Europe.
Yeah, that is the worrying feature because, as you know, I wrote that eventually the war would extend to Europe, specifically Poland initially. And this gives him all a casus belli. And this is the problem because, of course, it wasn't just Europe that is wrecking the peace process in Putin's eyes. It will be Ukraine as well. But he's decided not to mention Ukraine. He has said virtually nothing about President Zelensky changing his points. He is concentrated on Europe. And the implication is quite clear. There's now a clear reason, as far as he's concerned in his mind, that he can have a war with Europe and still blame the Europeans for it, for their destructive role. I must hasten to add, such a war would be a nuclear one, incidentally.
Yeah, that's a bit of a worry, isn't it? But before the talks with the Americans, Mr. Putin said that if Europe wants war, then Russia is ready right now. I mean, beyond the nuclear sort of thing that you were talking about, I mean, does this show that Mr. Putin thinks he can do a deal or is perhaps maneuvering to do a deal directly with Mr. Trump over the heads of the Europeans and the Ukrainians?
That is also an implication, no, not so much an implication as a possibility. The fact of the matter is it hinges whether President Donald Trump believes at the end of the day that what Putin suggests are further changes now to the proposals. If they were acceptable to the Americans, and in principle, yes, he could do just that. And that is what, of course, he indicated at the very start when he first presented President Zelensky with the proposal that he had agreed with President Putin and said to President Zelensky, in effect, take it or leave it. And if you do leave it, you can fight the war yourself. You can fight his little heart out, is the direct quote. And therefore, that remains a possibility. As things stand, there are pleasant relations between Russia and America. And therefore, there's yet another point behind all this. He keeps warning not America, not Ukraine, but Europe, which is, as I stated, the most likely extension of the battleground. And so this is the worrying feature about it. So it's if he did manage to make some sort of deal with America, not only would America not participate in helping Ukraine, as President Trump has already stated, but it is unlikely, in fact, also to help Europe. That is a further point of this possibility, which at present remains a theoretical possibility.
That's a very interesting analysis. And we know, as you hinted there, how keen Mr. Trump is to do a deal and to claim a win. In fact, his critics say that he is perhaps too eager to do a deal and that the Russians know this, which is why Mr. Putin is going in from the outset with maximalist demands, knowing that that is more likely to yield results that are more favorable to Russia. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's kind of a game of chicken, isn't it, in that sense? Just what can Russia get away with? And as you rightly say, Putin has got his, if you like, practical maximalist demands. Actually, his maximalist demand is to have the whole of Ukraine, please note. However, this is not on the cards at present, and he has settled for a portion of Ukrainian land and the limitation of the Ukrainian army and no membership of NATO. Well, it certainly is the case that not only does President Trump want peace to get, so it is said, the Nobel Peace Prize like Obama, but, and here comes the second point, there's a great deal of trade possible with Russia, far more possibilities than with Ukraine, because Russia is much, much bigger. And moreover, in terms of raw materials, Russia is a treasure trove. After all, the German Wunder economy was actually based on cheap Russian raw materials. So, yes, he may be over-eager, but he genuinely actually is wanting a deal and to have economics with Russia, because being a businessman, that's what he understands. Putin is, of course, a politician above all. And so therefore he knows how to exact the maximum political price for any economic concessions.
And would it be fair to say, Dr. Laskiewicz, that time is on Mr. Putin's side? Because, I mean, Russian forces are advancing on the battlefield, albeit slowly. The Ukrainians are losing ground. They have a manpower shortage. And the Kremlin doesn't have to worry about sort of pesky things like upcoming elections, like the Europeans have to worry about. So they can afford to sit it out and wait for a better deal, can't they?
Yes, this is the advantage that a totalitarian system, or at very least a dictatorship, has over a democracy. It's by no means clear that any West European or indeed East European elections will produce anti-Putin candidates who win. And therefore, that is one point. A second point is that Putin is not only advancing, but winter is advancing too. So it depends to see how Ukraine will want yet another winter being bombed and in the cold. So yes, this is another aspect. And the third aspect, that he has huge resources to draw on. And the fourth one is Ukraine hinges on American military aid. Nothing Europe's got is in that league. And were President Donald Trump to back down and back out of it because he's got a good deal with President Putin and thinks that President Zelensky should accept it, Ukraine would be a very difficult situation to defend herself on any sort of lines, especially with the problems you mentioned. There's a manpower shortage as well, just to add to its problems.
Much obliged to you, Dr. Laskiewicz, for your assessment. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is an international affairs analyst. He's also an acclaimed author, and he was talking to me on the line there from London.